Michael, as many of you know, is our Miami District President. He's also serving this year as a sponsorship chair. He'll, in that capacity, he'll be able to introduce today's sponsor. Michael and the Miami District have been leaders in this COVID-19 period, where we've adapted by maybe not holding as many face-to-face meetings as we're generally accustomed to. The Miami District did get to hold their Outlook conference earlier this year as a live event with over 200 attendees. But I don't know when we'll be able to resume those type of excellent presentations. But actually, and I've said this in the past, this Zoom type of presentation, I believe, has brought us closer together, because many times, and I know that many of you are from many other different parts. I'm coming to you today from my home in Vero Beach, Florida. I'm sure Michael and the rest of you may be coming from Dade, Broward counties, and some of our southern counties. So it enables us to do these things and do them on a regular basis. The Florida chapter of CCIM has been a leader in adapting to COVID-19. We've had Zoom meetings from a very early period beginning in March, with presentations by our chief economist for the Institute, CCIM Institute, Casey Conway. And we've continued it, and then they've been very, very closely followed by our members. So we look forward to today's presentation. And having said that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Michael. He's done a great job for us this year. He's been a tremendous leader for us. And Michael, go ahead and please introduce your panelists for today.
Great, thank you very much, Terry. As Terry said, I'm fortunate to be the Miami-Dade president here, and we've got some great people. Let me get the right slide up here. I apologize about that. Here we go. Let me share that. These are our speakers today. We are talking about valuations and property values around the state of Florida. We have Marty Kier, who is the Broward County property appraiser. He's going to be joining us. We have Sabrina Weiss-Robinson with Stearns, Weaver and Miller, and Paul Willies, and want to welcome them as our speakers. We also have our sponsor today. We're very privileged to have BGI Capital come on board with us and give us some insights and sponsor this great event. If I may, I'm going to take a moment and give one quick announcement here about an upcoming event. Paul Cauchi and Miami Commercial Board is putting on a sponsorship, a conference coming up on October 9th. And I just want to make this quick announcement. If any of you are interested in what else, for those of you around the state, this is a kind of like part two. Miami Commercial does a Outlook conference in October, and CCIM does our Outlook conference in January. So we kind of partner up with them and we split the calendar up. CCIM takes January, and then Miami Commercial does their conference in October. So we want to let you all know, if you're interested in that, that's going to be $20, and you can email Paul Cauchi on that. So that is our announcement. And then I want to bring on Marbelis, who is our sponsor today with BGI Capital. Go ahead, Marbelis.
BGI, yes. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for the opportunity of having us sponsor this event. For those of you who don't know me, like Michael said, my name is Marbelis Gonzalez, Commercial Real Estate Loan Officer with BGI Capital. It brings me joy to see so many of you join us in this initiative to continue networking and joining forces to achieve the ultimate goal of just getting deals done and closed. It's been an interesting year thus far for all of us, and especially for BGI, as it shows how resilient we are as a company. We've been fortunate enough to grow the company to its third location in this, we opened our third location in Boca Raton, Florida, which will allow us to target more in depth the Tri-County. We're also grateful to have added a new elite yet seasoned talent in the past 5 months. And all of this happened during the global pandemic. So we're not doing too bad. As a service lender and commercial real estate debt provider in Florida and New York, we were and have been actively lending these past few months, and more than ever, thinking outside the box for our clients. As a family operated company with its inception coming originally from the development world and the banking industry, We have an appetite for all asset types, value add plays, and even for construction financing. We've been consistent with our terms during these unprecedented times, and we've also lowered our interest rates to adjust to the market. If Michael allows me, I will be sharing with everyone participating on this Lunch and Learn our program matrix to give you a closer look at our products and our terms right now currently. I will end with this. If you have a loan scenario that you want to run by us, give me a call, shoot me an email, and I will be more than gladly run an initial analysis and tell you quickly if there's an appetite, if BGI has an appetite for it, and if so, provide you with a soft quote. I also encourage you to join our social media pages on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook using the handle @BGI Capital. And thank you again, Michael and CCIM, for having us. We hope to continue and also do new business with many of you in the very near future. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And she's not only with BGI Capital, but she's our returning secretary on our executive board for the Miami-Dade District. So we appreciate all of her volunteerism and helping us out and keeping Miami-Dade District moving forward. So thank you very much. And also for sponsoring today, really appreciate it. So let's jump in, and I see we've got Marty on the line. You ready, Marty? Okay.
I am.
Welcome. Thank you so much. We're gonna start off with you, Marty, and let me introduce. I understand you're a lifelong resident of Broward County. You also served in the Florida House of Representatives, and you've been the tax assessor for Broward County since January of 2017. Is that correct?
Yes, it definitely is.
Great.
Oh,
well, thank you so much. And we'll let you get started, but I want to start off with a question. And I emailed Pam. I hope you got the question, so I'm not throwing you a curveball here.
no, that's okay.
We had Pedro Garcia back in July, and not that Miami-Dade is competing in any way with Broward County. We're not, but want to see what we're talking about. What is the big value here? We're all in this commercial industry, commercial real estate. What is the total value of all the private property in Broward County? What kind of big number are we talking about?
Well, that is such a great question, Michael, and I really appreciate you having me on today. I was really looking forward to this, and I did get that question, and so I came with a few numbers that I wanted to kind of share with you. It might be a little bit of a long-winded answer, but it kind of has a whole lot of facts in there, and so I just kind of wanted to go through it with you. And again, thank you for having me on. And for everybody that I haven't mentioned, again, my name's Marty Kerr. I'm honored to be your Broward County property appraiser. And if you live in Miami, move to Broward. It is awesome here. Broward's the best. It's right in the middle of the Tri-County area. It's so easy to get to Miami, Palm Beach. You get to be right in the center. So trust me, we would love to have you come to our area. But with that said, you know, it's a very interesting year. And I can talk about for the market value that we have and also the taxable value. And I'd love it if it's okay, Michael, if to also tie in, how does this terrible pandemic affect property values for tax purposes for this year?
Absolutely. I mean, you see more deals closed than anybody else. So we want to hear what you got to say. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So first, for our purposes, and I'll talk about at least when it comes to the value of property that we look at, our date of assessment is January 1st. So January 1st is the date that we determine the value of all property in the county, whether it's residential, commercial, tangible personal property, or centrally assessed property, which are railroads. So when you all get your tax bill come November, whether it's from us or Miami-Dade, it's based on what was the value of that property, less any exemptions, on January 1st of 2020. And so on January 1st of 2020, things were looking pretty good because we had to use the data from 2019 to determine the value on January 1, 2020. Unfortunately, all of the terrible effects of COVID-19 happened after January. And the law prohibits us from utilizing that to determine the value of property, at least for this year, for tax purposes, where all of the terrible effects of this pandemic will be utilized, will be for next year's tax bill. And so on January 1, 2021, that's when we're going to look at the data, whether they're home prices for residentials and for comparable sales, or for income that commercial properties have produced this year, to determine the value for next year for the 2021 tax bill. But let me talk about where things are, and then I'll kind of give you my thoughts so far this year on some of the data that we've seen so far with regard to the impact of this pandemic. Let me compare it from 2019 to 2020. So in 2019, on January 1, 2019, when we valued all property in the county, you take residential and commercial, tangible personal property, we had in Broward County right about $281.3 billion worth of value. To 2020, there was a 4.46% increase in market value, which was really based on a lot of new construction, especially coming out of Fort Lauderdale, to about $293.9 billion. Now, the commercial portion of that, in 2019, we had about $73.75 billion worth of value, of market value of property. For 2020, that increased to about $78.1 billion. And that's because, again, 2019 was very strong. You had a lot of homes that were sold, and you had a lot of businesses producing a whole lot of income. And that's why you see that increase. The taxable value is basically the value that our local governments utilize in determining how much money they need. That's what they set their millage rates on. Mm-hmm. And the taxable value for 2019 was about $199 billion. For 2020, there was a 6% increase to about $211 billion. Again, that's really driven by a lot of new construction and a lot of people moving into Broward County. The largest sales for 2019 that we saw, both came out of Fort Lauderdale. One was on 17th Street, which was apartments for about $136 million. And the other one is basically Flagler Village. The Flagler Village apartments for about $92.9 billion. And then new construction this year that we put on the market in 2019 that is really driving our increases. 4 out of the 5 new construction projects were multifamily projects from Fort Lauderdale because there is a lot of construction, there's a lot of building up, and there's a lot of new value being added to the tax roll. So you can see Broward County is a big place. More people live here than 13 states, the District of Columbia, and all U.S. territories except Puerto Rico. And those are big numbers, but it does show that our market is strong. And now let me tell you what's happened so far this year, because I think this question may come up. So generally, our office handles about 300 property transfers every single day. That's how many properties, whether residential or commercial, sell on the open market daily. When the pandemic first hit and people started working from home, there were less properties that were being sold during that time. And so it went from about 300 property transfers to about 100 property transfers. But the one thing, and this is residential, but the one thing that didn't change was the value. The prices that people were paying were still very, very high. Those didn't decrease. So there were less transfers of property, less property sold, but the values, people were still paying what they were pre-pandemic. Now, some time has gone by, and now property transfers, properties that are changing hands are basically to what they were pre-pandemic and even exceeding that. And so right now what we see with residential property is you have more than 300 properties that transfers that we're handling every single day, and values are rising higher, higher, and higher. It's kind of amazing. Where I do think, at least for tax purposes, where you're going to see a big decrease in value next year is through commercial property. Because as you know, one way that we value commercial property, it's not just on comparable sales, it's based on income. And unfortunately, so many businesses suffered this year. So many, there was a lot of vacancy. People weren't, making their rent payments. I mean, it was just very, very, very hard for businesses. And so I have a feeling, and I can't say for certain yet, but I have a feeling that a lot of businesses in Broward County are going to be coming into our office on January 1st, 2021, and they're going to share their income information with us. And if their income information shows what it's likely going to show, I think that you'll probably see a possible decrease in the commercial values for next year for tax purposes. I don't see that for residential, but I do see that right now for commercial. That was a long-winded answer. I hope I wasn't all over the place and I made a little bit of sense there. But the last thing I wanted to bring up, though, was we actually have the 3 cities in Broward County that have had the highest increases in value for both residential and commercial. The number 1 city was Pembroke Park at 10.5%. The second one was West Park at 10.1%, and then North Lauderdale at 8.6%. And so much of that is being driven by, residential property transfers. Those 3 cities are great cities. And they're attracting a lot of young families who are making it their home because it's a great place to live. They provide wonderful services. And also the homes are more affordable than they would be in some of our other cities. And so that's why you see a lot of growth in those cities in particular. So I hope that that answered the question. It was a long-winded one. I apologize if I kind of just went on and on.
Sure, appreciate that. Let's talk about velocity. You said that things are more than 300 transfers a day now. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask Sabrina, I'm going to ask Paul the same question when it's their turn to talk. What do you think is driving that velocity? Is it just a pent-up demand that we had such a bad second quarter and third quarter and they're getting caught up? Or is it more of a panic, like something bad's coming in the future and I want to lock in a really good value now? What's your thoughts on the velocity?
Sure, I'll tell you what it is. And actually, the Sun Sentinel ran a story a few days ago on this very issue. And every day we have about 1,000 people moving from the Northeast to South Florida. And so many of those people are coming to the Tri-County area because this is just a great place. I mean, think about it. Whether you live in Miami-Dade, Broward County, or Palm Beach County, you can't beat our weather. You can't beat the things to do. It's just an awesome place to live. And we have no income tax. We're really a low taxing state. And unfortunately, you have some of these Northeast states that really have, they're taxing people very, very heavily. And now that people are able to work a little bit more from home, they're remotely working from home, they're actually able now to make that move. And so actually what we see is a lot of people from the Northeast coming here and making South Florida their home once again. And that's really, really the big driver. And that's also driving a lot of the new construction as well. Like I said, especially in Fort Lauderdale, we have a lot of retirees coming down. This is really the place to be for many reasons. Like I said, one, it's an awesome place. You can't beat our weather. You can't beat our people. It's just an awesome place. But at the same time, we are a low taxing state. We don't have an income tax. Our sales tax is much more fair than other states. And at the end of the day, you can pay a lot more in property taxes elsewhere. To give you an idea, if you live in New York City, and I love New York City, my whole family's from there, but they actually, if you live there and you work there, you pay a city income tax, a state income tax, and a federal income tax. So much of your income is taken away from you. Somebody from New York City can move to Florida and basically pay a federal income tax, pay property taxes. That's it. It is a good deal to move here, and a lot of people are taking advantage of the awesome place that we have, and that's what it is.
Obviously, tax, as you said, tax values are set on January 1st. And obviously March 15th, the whole world started changing and yes, deteriorating and different things. What kind of programs or what kind of things do you think are going to be available between now and those people, those investors, those owners of commercial property with their taxes for this calendar year? I mean, sure, we're going to put the same question to Sabrina, who also delves into that. But, you know, I mean, that's a rough thing for some of these investors, especially if they're not collecting rent. Mm-hmm.
You know what? And that's a great question. There are so many people that are suffering, and every day I get emails and calls from people who are really on hard times, and of course they're not bringing in the revenue that they need to make ends meet. You have a lot of landlords, for example, as you know, who aren't being paid rent, but they still have to make their mortgage payments, and they still have to pay their taxes, their insurance. You have a lot of people who are having a very difficult time. And unfortunately, we have to, our office, at least for our purposes, we have to specifically follow what the law tells us we can and we can't do. Mm-hmm. And for example, every exemption for residential property, it's in the Constitution. The 10% cap for commercial property, it's in the Constitution. How we value the property is basically in the Constitution. You have to use the data from the year prior to determine basically what is the value of that property going to be. And so for our purposes, at least for our office, there are currently really no tools that we've been provided that can really provide non-homesteaded properties really any relief this year. We can next year when we look at January 1, 2021 for the November tax bill at that time, then we can look at what happened. But unless the legislature or the governor through executive order gives us the ability to be able to utilize the data from this year in adjusting this year's values, there's not a lot we can do. But with that said, I am hopeful that something will be done, because generally, for example, let's say a hurricane hit. A hurricane's hit in the past. Let's say a hurricane from 2 years ago. I can't remember what it was. It hit and people got damaged. The legislature that year then gave property appraisers the ability to make adjustments to the value for that year if they were impacted by the hurricane. Well, what we're going through now is a pandemic nobody saw coming. No, I mean, this is a once in a lifetime thing that is hurting a lot of people. So I am very hopeful that the legislature and the governor will give us some tools to be able to help a lot of the people who are suffering. I think there's a lot that they can do. I belong to a property appraiser association, and there's going to be a number of things that we're going to be advocating for. And so that's what I'm very hopeful, because people need that help. And I just want the tools to be able to provide that help to them.
Sure. And you think the legislature is going to come through with something? We're hopeful of that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I do. You know, you can, so I served in the legislature, and the one thing I could say is you just never know, you know,
Of course.
you know, you never know what is going to happen at the end of the day. You know, there's 120 members of the Florida House, 40 members of the Senate, you have the governor, and they only have 2 months to really get things done. But they do a good job at times. And, you know, and I think this is a pandemic. It doesn't care about party. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, independent, not registered to vote. This is a people pandemic that everybody's going through. And so what I've seen the legislature do in the past, even though they may at times have their partisan differences on different issues, when there's an issue like this that affects everyone, where everyone's suffering, regardless of who it is, they'll come together. And so I'm very, very hopeful that they'll do that. And I'll give you a smaller example. Last year, tax bills were due on March 31st. Governor DeSantis signed a number of executive orders to extend the time for tax bills to be people be able to pay them. That gave the tax collectors the authority to extend the time so people wouldn't go into default and certificates couldn't be sold. And so I have a feeling this year the legislature is going to look to see what occurred, look to see how they can help people. I'm hopeful, and I'm very optimistic that they'll do the right thing and provide relief to Florida's, you know, property owners.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Anything else? Because we want to jump over to Sabrina next, unless there's something else you want to throw out before we go over to Sabrina and let her talk about tax appeals.
Oh, wonderful. Well, the only thing I just want to add is I just want to thank everybody on here, especially if you're a resident of Broward County. Thank you very much for allowing me to serve another term. I was just reelected as our Broward County property appraiser. And I have to tell you, you know, you mentioned it before, there's a number of jobs I've been able to hold in the legislature. I've been served on the county commission. I was the mayor of the county, and now I'm our property appraiser. This is by far the best job I've ever had. And the reason being is because what you all allow me to do, you let me interact with everybody. And the nature of the job lets you help people. You know, when I was in the legislature, you got to debate big issues, whether it was education and healthcare, and you knew you were doing good stuff, but you were so far away, you didn't always meet the people getting help. On the county commission, Broward County is bigger than 13 states. It was great. You made decisions for the port and the airport and other important regional issues, but you were still very far away. This job lets me interact with everybody. Every time I give a senior an exemption that I get to personally give, I get to hug them. Every time I get to go to a veteran, you know, because of your service, what you gave up, you no longer have to pay property taxes. You know, I get to shake their hand and thank them for what they did. This is such a great job, and I'm just so appreciative that you all have allowed me to keep it. So thank you very much. And if there's anything I can do, please give me a holler. And the last thing is, if you live in Broward County, you have till September 18th to contact our office this year so that we can make any adjustments to your property. That is the deadline to file up for tax saving exemptions. It's the deadline to file for us to review your value. And it's also, as Sabrina's going to mention, the deadline for you to file a petition with the Value Adjustment Board. And the only way that we can work on your property after the deadline is if you file a petition with the Value Adjustment Board. So this is the last week. If you have any concerns, please let's address them so we can make sure we get it right. So when your real tax bill comes out in November, it'll accurately reflect the value you're supposed to pay taxes on. Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate it.
We do appreciate it. For those of you on the session, we've got about 120 people watching us right now. There is a Q&A button at the bottom. If you want to type in a question, we're going to come back here and we're going to get to as many questions at the end of the session. But I want to introduce Sabrina Robinson, who is with Stearns, Weaver, and Miller. She has been involved in litigation in Miami-Dade County in South Florida for over 30 years, but the last 17 have been focused on property taxes. So she brings a lot of great knowledge and value, and she's been a sponsor with Miami-Dade District CCIM, and really learned a lot in July from your talk, and so we wanted to bring you back and let you share some of this with the rest of CCIM around Florida. So Sabrina.
Michael, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure sitting on another panel with you, and it's a real pleasure to sit with these panelists. And Marty, you are really, I travel the state. I go to basically every county in the state. Truly my favorite property appraiser. Because as he comes across now, he is the most genuine person, and his goal really is to be fair and be open and have conversations with the taxpayer and arrive at what is a just value. And I think whereas most people would think that our jobs really are adversarial in nature, it could not be further from the truth. We enjoy this amazing relationship with their office, and whereas they look at the big picture, we have the luxury of digging deep and looking at each property individually. So there's many times, thankfully, because it gives me a job, that I can bring information to their office that shows that perhaps a property may be overvalued for reasons they may not even have been aware of. So we appreciate all you do. So glad you've been reelected. And I might mention, reelected because unopposed, because there's nobody else that can do the job that you do.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabrina. I really appreciate it. That was so nice of you to say. Thank you. And by the way, Sabrina is 100% right about something. I just want to add, I do not look at anybody filing a petition with the Value Adjustment Board as an adversarial process. It's really about helping us find the true value of property. So I always tell folks, if we can't work it out and if you want to file a petition, go for it. Let's go to a special magistrate, put the information before them, and they'll let us know this is the value of the property. And whatever the decision they have is what we all have to abide by. It's not an adversarial process. It's a process to find what is the true value of the property so that people only pay their fair share. Sabrina's 1,000,000,000% right. Thank you very much.
So just as general background, as Michael put it, I have been a practicing attorney for 30 plus years, which makes me sound really old. That bothers me a little bit, but the last 17 purely focused on ad valorem tax. I head the ad valorem tax department at Stearns Weaver Miller. Although we're located in Miami-Dade County, we do have an office in Broward, Tallahassee, Tampa, and in Coral Gables. So we are part-time residents of Broward County, and we cover the whole state though. We have clients that range really from a national, statewide footprint to regional clients with large portfolios, all the way to local clients that may just have a single property. And really, I'm fortunate enough to work with my clients for sometimes 10 to 15 years already, which to me is a sign of a happy client. As I mentioned, our process really is not adversarial in nature with the property appraiser's office. It's just that we have the benefit of looking at a property on an individual basis, where the property appraiser's office, who's charged with, managing hundreds of thousands of properties, as well as tangible personal property accounts as well, they look at it on a big scale and mass appraisal. Whereas we have the luxury really, and we have the skill set to look at a deep dive on each property. We not only have the ability to understand the performance of each property, but we utilize our substantive in-house resources and relationships, along with outside sources like what Paul brings to the table, to understand how our clients' properties and values relate to the market. This puts us in an excellent position to enlighten the magistrate if we have to go to hearing, or to negotiate with the property appraiser's office directly to explain to them why we think the value may be incorrect for that year and achieve a reduction of value. And this ability to utilize a really hyper-focused analysis versus a mass appraisal analysis results in our office achieving significant reductions on behalf of our clients. In the 2019 tax year, we achieved reductions of $340 million in market value, which equates to about $5 million in tax dollars. So in a time where particularly businesses are stressed, they're financially pressed, taxes are a very large component, particularly of commercial property. Marty mentioned the timeline to you. Let me take a step back. We represent basically every kind of property. In fact, I don't think there's many property types we haven't touched upon. Commercial, residential, The commercial uses include everything from large office buildings, hospitals, ALFs, car dealerships, to we handle tangible personal property for those property owners as well. We represent developers in challenging sometimes the values of their undeveloped land as well. So there's a large breadth of property types that we manage and we handle, and generally speaking, we sit down with our clients, we run an analysis for them based upon the information they provide us, and we give them a recommendation whether we think they're valued properly or perhaps they're overvalued and subject to a challenge and a reduction. I can tell you Marty addressed, you know, the pandemic issue really well. Unfortunately, timing is everything, and the property appraiser is charged, as he said, as looking at a snapshot in time, and that snapshot is January 1st, 2020. And for most income generating properties, most segments of the industries that we cover were sitting very pretty come January 1st, even into the first quarter of 2020. And there were certain segments that were problematic pre-pandemic as well, which I think you're not going to see big upticks, if any upticks in value for 2020, such as the retail market. Retail has been distressed, continues to be distressed, and unfortunately, post-pandemic, I think you're going to see even more bankruptcies and closings of large retailers. But other industries that were thriving pre-pandemic, like industrial property, thriving through the pandemic for many reasons, including there's been now a change of course in how retailers handle their sales and their footprint, and they're looking to smaller physical footprints and larger distribution through warehouse facility. So industrial sales have not lagged. As Marty touched on also, single family homes, the market is hot right now because really we have a huge influx of Northeasterners coming to the South Florida markets. The values are unchanged. If anything, values may be up right now and the sales are brisk. Whereas the condo market, however, is soft. It was soft pre-pandemic, or it continues to be soft. As opposed to 2020, I think you really are going to see reductions in 2021 because you do look at a trailing 12 income. Marty touched on another important point. How can the property appraiser help for this year in responding to issues with the pandemic? They really can't because they're limited by statute to look at January 1st. What needs to happen is you need to lobby your legislators. Lobby your legislators, reach out to the governor. There's going to have to be assistance at a different level that will trickle down to then allow the property appraiser and or the tax collector to help the taxpayer themselves. There are other states that have calamity statutes. We have certain calamity statutes, as Marty mentioned, with hurricanes. If there's a hurricane that damages your property, there's a statute that controls, that allows reductions in value moving forward until the property has achieved the same position it was pre-hurricane. But we don't have general calamity statutes. And in other states that clearly are equally as affected by this pandemic, there have been things that happen. There are tools that the legislature has provided. It's not by way of a reduction in value, but it's by way of an extension of time to pay your taxes and to maybe not have tax certificates sold if you have not paid your taxes. But really, people are going to have to speak up, and they're going to have to reach out to their legislators and the governor to have this come to fruition. The reality is the legislature is not in session, in regular session, until March. And for a tax bill to be timely paid, it's the end of March. My strong suspicion is there are going to be special sessions of the legislature, but my strong suspicion is it will not be until after the election. So people should be active and people should make their needs known. As far as timing, I mean, this is a really timely seminar because trim notices are all out. If you have not received your trim notices for every county virtually, you can just look online and you can access your trim notice there. There was a 25-day window to file petitions. Many counties' deadlines have already passed. The Tri-County area though, for instance, Palm Beach County deadline is Monday, Miami-Dade and Broward, Pinellas is Friday. Those are the only ones that are sticking out in my mind right now, but there are a number of deadlines that do not come into play until next week. But the 18th is the latest deadline for any county. And as Marty said, really, property appraisers are happy to speak to you informally beforehand, but if you have not reached a resolution, the only way to challenge a value thereafter is by way of filing a petition with the Value Adjustment Board, or if really warranted, you could go the circuit court route. And you can file an original lawsuit without having a Value Adjustment Board petition, but other issues come into play with that. It's a more time-consuming venue to be in, and really right now, really more time-consuming because of the nature of our world in Corona land. So that's a timeline, and I'm happy to entertain any questions either on the seminar, or I know we're tight for time. Anybody can reach out to me otherwise as well.
Great, thank you so much, Sabrina. Really appreciate the update on that. We've got about a half a dozen questions that are coming in, but I want to bring Paul in and introduce Paul. Paul is a state certified appraiser. His company is Appraisal Development International, and you work out of the Tampa West Coast market. I know you're also a sponsor and a speaker with the CCIM West District on the West Coast of Florida. So thank you for joining us, and look forward to hearing what you've got. The same kind of questions of obviously we've got a lot of challenges now, but this velocity, what's driving this market with so many uncertainties? And so I'll turn the screen over to you and let you put your slides up and introduce. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Paul Willis. I'm an independent appraiser, and I do look at project by project. I have the luxury of doing that. My slide presentation kind of goes through the process and kind of gives you some of my observations, I think, of where we are going and where we're at. So I share the screen, I guess?
Sure, go ahead.
Can you see my slides?
Not yet. If you, there you go.
Okay. So I'm Paul Willis. I've been a state certified appraiser for the last 20 years. I took over the company from my father, who started in Safety Harbor in 1979. Unfortunate timing maybe, but I just purchased Appraisal Alliance, which is a residential appraisal company, back in April. So now I have a team of residential appraisers in Tampa Bay area. So for residential, we serve the whole of the Tampa Bay area. And in commercial, I pretty much work throughout Florida. I've done projects down to the Keys, to Tallahassee, to Jacksonville, all the way down the east and west coast on a variety of different projects. And my clients include real estate agents, lawyers, accountants, developers, insurance agencies, and individual property owners, and sometimes banks. I actually try to lean away from the banks. They present me the hardest problem sometimes. So the COVID-19, the pandemic of pandemics, and what's been the effect on the market. If you ask a residential broker, it's been an amazing year. Homes are being snapped up at an ever-increasing rate. These are the statistics from this past month for the Tampa Bay area. Property values to average sales price are up 13% this past month. Volume all the way across the board is up. Active listings are down because people are a little reluctant to put their properties on the market, but those that do are seeing them snapped up in shorter and shorter period of time. The days on the market is down 4% to about 54. And it's pretty much right across the board. I mean, if you're in residential and a residential appraiser, we've got lots of work, and there seems to be no stopping to the deals. However, but commercial is kind of a different story. It's not so great. I pulled these statistics from Broward County. Now, it's important to note that this is just, I'm specifically looking at qualified sales within a small window. These are not all the sales for Broward County, but I just isolated for the January-March 2019, the sales in multifamily, commercial, industrial, institutional, and land. These are not values, but the total volume of the sales. So like in January-March, there were 138 transactions for 846 million. In the same period in January-March of 2020, interestingly enough, and I was surprised, the numbers actually came down. I don't know if that's because I'm missing some of the sales, but in January-March time, it looked like the volume dropped by 40, in total sales volume of about 41%. But more interestingly is what happened in the last 3 months, in June to August. In June to August, there were 107 transactions of 339 million. In the June for 2019, in June to August of 2020, 85 transactions of 123 million, a reduction of 63% in the total volume. And just by comparison, and I should also mention that in the August figures, sometimes there's a lag between properties actually getting onto the property appraisers list because the transactions, although may be recorded, don't always automatically, there's a trail into, in this case, into September. So maybe August numbers are down a little bit to what was real. But comparing that to Hillsborough County, in Hillsborough County in Tampa Bay, January, March of 2019, there's 174 deals, 872 million. In January, March, it actually went up to a billion and 44 million, of a 19% increase. However, in June to August of 2019, we had 180 transactions of 1.5 million. In June to August of this year, 117 transactions, but 461 million, a 70.9% reduction. So both Broward and Hillsborough are kind of similar in the sense of there's, in these last 3 months, we're seeing a reduction in the number of transactions that are a substantial reduction in the number of transactions that are taking place. So that's kind of important, because what is the effect on values? This is where it becomes a little more difficult. Now, traditionally, as a property appraiser, we look at sales, income, and cost, and all three approaches play into value. Sales, comparable sales can be as much as 3 years old for me as a private appraiser. So when I appraise a property, properties over the summer, sales and finding sales comparables have been pretty good. So values have actually remained high on the sales side. Sales in the past 3 months, though, however, have slowed, and values are now being negotiated at 5 or 20% below market, below where they were a year ago. On the income side, the income statements up to March were looking pretty healthy. However, this is where the shoe has dropped. Income, as Marty said, pretty much right across the board nosedived, especially in hospitality, hotels, restaurants, and retail, are really right across the board. Banks are now asking for separate financials before March and after March to try and judge the effect of the COVID-19 on the market. So income statements in 2020 are going to be 30 to 60% below where they were in 2019. Now, this summer, we've been kind of propped up a little bit with the economic injury disaster loans from the SBA, the Paycheck Protection Program, and the $600 a week boost in unemployment. All have helped to pay the mortgages and rents that have kept those deals on the table. But that money has run out and is going away, and will be, these next 2-3 months are going to see kind of a reduction in that income. So income-wise, this has led to banks that are asking for a higher loan-to-value ratios if they're going to lend at all. Now, we've seen banks over the summer who just stopped lending in commercial, but they've started to lend again, but they're looking for a higher LTV. And for appraisals, we're having to adjust down the values based on higher cap rates. So land sales have pretty much stayed strong as far as price goes, and material costs have edged up 2.3. For many contractors, the lack of demand for the services has emerged as the leading source of concern due to the COVID-19 pandemic, followed closely behind by a fear of inflation and further increases in material prices. So what's the bottom line? If you're in a restaurant business, selling your real estate and leasing it back is a trend we're starting to notice. Hotels are changing focus and selling to locals, abandoning expensive international advertising and adopting competitive pricing and offering more in-house incentives. I just actually talked to a guy who's working in hotels, and he said the hotels that have kitchenettes are doing really well, especially on the beach, as strong as they have been in any year. People are choosing those places to come because they can cook in the room rather than going out to a restaurant. Retail are upping the game with online sales by closing brick and mortar locations. Office properties are downsizing, although in some cases expanding. Although they sent their employees home to work from home, now they're bringing them back into their offices and they're having to spread them out a little bit. So in some cases, in the office market, people are going to be looking for larger space to accommodate the same number of people. Industrial demand has remained pretty consistent all the way through this period, although staffing is also a major concern. So it's inevitable that with income down 30 to 60% and sales overall down 60 to 70%, that values in this next quarter and through 2021 will pull down commercial real estate by at least 20 to 30%. But it's also important to note that even before the pandemic, appraisers were warning that the values could not sustain the gains of the last 10 years, with echoes of the Great Recession of 2008. So 1920, so some dates for you. 1929 was the Great Depression that lasted between 1921 to the late 30s. 1986 was the savings and loan crisis, 1986 to 1995. 2008 is our Great Recession, and now 2020, COVID-19, the pandemic. I ran through that really quickly. Welcome any questions, and with that, I'll pass it back to Michael.
Well, thank you, Paul. A lot of great information in there and a lot of great statistics. I'm curious to see if if we can go back a couple to the valuations. I know you're talking about dropping prices 20 to 30% across the board, but let's go and look at industrial. Do you see that kind of drop in industrial? Because it's very easy to see that in retail and offices, but I'm hearing things that industrial is very, very strong in South Florida.
And in Tampa Bay, you have the stories of Amazon buying up and building massive warehouses. Industrial property it continues to be strong, and as I said briefly, you know, it's really carried pretty well through the summer. The issues with industrial is really one of staffing and keeping the staffing levels up. But yeah, as people are warehousing products rather than retailing them directly, there is a pent-up demand, and Tampa Bay, especially between Tampa through to Orlando, and the corridor has seen Lakeland area with Publix and with Amazon have seen massive new warehouses going up to provide distribution centers through Central Florida.
Great. And then let's just say you were given an assignment, a 4-story office building out in the suburbs. It's an office building with so much uncertainty. Obviously, you're going to look at cash flow and the leases and things. What kind of things are you going to be looking at to determine the long-term value of that property? I mean, there's just so much uncertainty with offices and retail too. So what are you looking for?
The diversification of the income. And if it's a one office building occupied by one venture, one business, it's more susceptible to issues than if it has multi-tenants. So multi-tenant properties, you can kind of spread the load across. So if you lose one, it's not the end of the earth. So office buildings with multiple tenants are still and will continue to be strong, although the market rate for those office buildings may slow down or drop for a little bit through this next year.
Great. Thank you. So I want to jump to some of the questions that have come in on the Q&A board. And Marty, I know you don't set the tax rate. You set the tax value. Each local municipality sets the rate. But the first question is, with all the influx of new residents coming to Florida, how do you think this will impact our taxes in order to keep up with road expansion, schools, et cetera? So what kind of tax rates are you hearing about or being proposed?
Sure, and that's a great question. You know, in Broward County, we have 31 cities. And you have the school board, and you have the county commission, and you have a whole other, a lot of taxing authorities with their hospital districts and others. And this year, as we spoke about, just about every city has seen an increase in value. And so what that basically means is if a city keeps their tax rates the same this year, they hold it harmless, they don't increase, they don't decrease it, just about every city is going to see an increase in revenue more this year than last year. To give you an example, the county commission saw a 6.16% increase in its taxable value. It kept its millage rate the same, so that means it brought in another $67 million of additional revenue this year than last year. And that's what most of the cities are doing. If you open up the newspaper, the Sun Sentinel, for example, every single day you'll see a required advertisement or notice that basically says proposed property tax increase. Each of the cities are required to do that. And the reason that's there is because the legislature has required all of our governments, if they do not decrease the millage, if they keep the millage the same but values increase, they have to let people know that it's going to be a tax increase because you're going to be paying a little bit more in taxes if they keep that the same. And so that's pretty much what every city has done. The county's done, I believe the school board. I haven't heard of any taxing authority, and I may be wrong, that's reduced the millage rate this year, but I also can't think of one that's increased it either. But what's also important to note, and I think this is important, is the Save Our Homes assessment clause of the Florida Constitution is so important. The vast majority of people that live in Broward County, that live in Palm Beach County, are homesteaded property owners. When they filed for homestead, they basically made that their primary residence. It basically said the value that they're taxed on couldn't go up more than 3% a year, or the consumer price index, whichever's lower. This year, the consumer price index was 2.3%. So that means even if the market value of your home this year went up 50, 60, 70%, the value you're taxed on can't go more than 2.3%. So for example, the increase in value that I spoke about just before, the 6.16% overall increase countywide that the county commission's using, and that extra $67 million that's coming in, much of that is being paid for by new construction out of the tax roll and a lot of people moving in, because if you're a homesteaded property owner and you're an existing homesteaded property owner, the value you're taxed on couldn't go more than 2.3% if your market value got much higher. So this year, I think our taxing authorities are doing good, and I think our school board is doing well with its revenue coming in to provide, a great education to our kids. The county has, a good amount of money so it can build roads and have mass transit and provide very important functions. The cities as well. I do think though, and I may be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but next year could be vastly different. I know you've heard a lot of information about what's happening with the commercial sector. And, if the trends stay the same, we really may not see a decrease for residential values for tax purposes next year, but we may for commercial. So where this year there's been an increase, that possibly may be different next year. And so I do know a lot of the cities, and I believe the county, the school board, and other taxing authorities are also preparing for that as well. That was my long-winded answer. And I'm also glad you brought this up, Michael. I always like to tell folks, I am not the guy that collects the taxes, and I don't set the tax rates. I'm the guy that gives you tax saving exemptions, helps you save money in your property taxes. That's my job. But thank you. I hope I answered your question.
Sure. We have another question. They want to know about the law that prohibits the decrease in the valuation because it's set on January. And you already answered that. You said that's locked in by the state constitution, right?
It is.
January 1st.
It does. The Florida Constitution sets January 1st as our date of assessment. And we're prohibited by law from looking past the date of assessment. Every once in a while, and this is rarely, we can, if there's no other information from the year prior, we can use, for example, a comparable sale that may be after January 1st, but the law says the farther it is from January 1st, the less probative it becomes. And so that's very rare. If there's information prior to January 1st, and there always is, that's what we have to use. We're technically not allowed to go past January 1st, pursuant to the law. We would violate the Constitution. And that's why this year in particular is just so difficult for so many people, because every day, and rightfully so, people call me, they email me, they contact our office, and they say, Marty, I'm really suffering. I'm having such a hard time can you please help me with my values for this year? And based on what's happened as a result of COVID, and it's heartbreaking, but I have to tell people, I'm so sorry. The law doesn't allow me to do that. We have to look at the data from last year. And then I'll go through it with them to see if there's anything from last year we can help them. But we're just really not allowed to use the data from this year. And we definitely can't use income data from this year. It has to be from the year prior.
And what were the 3 cities that you mentioned earlier? Somebody else wanted to repeat those that were.
Sure. Of course, the 3 cities that have had the highest increase in value for this year is Pembroke Park had a 10.5% increase in value. The city of West Park had a 10.1% increase in value. And the city of North Lauderdale, which had an 8.6% increase in value. And like you said, the reason that's occurred is because all 3 of those cities are great places to live. I can definitely tell you, I know the elected officials that are there and the people on their staff, and they provide wonderful services to people. They have great parks, they have great mass transit. There's a lot that they do for the people of those communities, making it a great place. There are also places where a lot of young families are moving into, a lot of teachers and a lot of people that may not be able to afford, a home elsewhere. For example, in the city of Weston, I don't have the exact number, but the average price for a single family home is more than $500,000. That's a very high number that a lot of people cannot afford. But there are still areas in Broward County that are great places to live where you can afford that property, where you can raise a family, you can be happy, and you can have that home ownership. And those 3 cities in particular provide that to so many people. And that's why you see such an increase in value in those cities. And what's interesting, the cities that have had the lowest increase in value are cities like Weston and a few others where the home prices are just so not affordable for so many of the people that live here and the people that are moving in.
Thank you. I want to give you one more question because I know you have to leave at 1 o'clock, and I do appreciate your time. Have you seen more people applying for additional homestead exemption? And have you seen more seniors applying for homestead exemption? And what are those dates for that?
Such a great question. I really appreciate that. What I love most about my job is you get to give tax saving exemptions to people that qualify. And there are a lot of exemptions under Florida law that people qualify for. And you mentioned 2 of them. The most important one by far is the homestead exemption. It's almost like the gateway exemption. You can't have any other exemption unless you have that one first. And to qualify for a homestead exemption, you basically have had to lived on your property on January 1st of this year, for example, and you can't have a homestead or any other exemption anywhere else. You can only have exemptions on one property. If you do that, you have till September 18th. The deadline's coming so that we can apply a homestead exemption to you. So there's anybody that's watching. If you lived on your property on January 1st of this year, it's your primary residence. You don't have a exemption anywhere else. Please contact me by September 18th because we can still apply a homestead exemption to you. That'll save you $800, $900, maybe $1,000 right off the top, and it will really protect you going forward because it'll kicking that cap. There are so many other exemptions, and you mentioned my favorite. My favorite's the low-income senior exemption. And here's the way that you can you qualify for it. And actually, there's an additional very large low-income senior exemption in Broward County this year that I'm really trying to get the word out to as well. So to qualify for just the typical low-income senior exemption, you have to be over 65 years of age. You have to make under for this year $30,721. And if you don't file income taxes, Social Security doesn't count. If you do file income taxes, you have to look at the adjusted gross income line. I believe it's line 7 of your income tax statement. If that's under $30,721, you basically get almost like another homestead exemption. Think about this. Imagine somebody lives in Century Village, Pembroke Pines. They get a homestead exemption, $50,000 of value is taken off the tax roll. They then get a low-income senior exemption, another $25,000 is taken off the tax roll. Off the start, they're only paying tax on $25,000 of value, or their tax is basically 1/4 of what they wouldn't have been if they didn't have any other exemption, if we had valued the market value at $100,000. That's pretty incredible. There is another very important exemption that some seniors can qualify for. Not a lot of seniors qualify for it, but the ones that do, they save a lot of money. And that's called the long-term senior exemption. And here's what it is. If you meet the income qualification, basically you make under $30,721, you are over 65 years of age or older, and if you've lived in your home for 25 years or more, and the value of your home is under $250,000, you're entitled to a full property tax exemption from the county portion of the tax bill, and in many of our cities from the city portion of the tax bill. So think about this. Imagine you live in Pompano and you qualify for that. This year you would pay no taxes to the county, no taxes to the city of Pompano. You basically be paying your school board taxes and a few other taxing authorities, and that's it. The majority of your taxes will be wiped out. There are so many exemptions. You have large exemptions for veterans. You have, for example, if you're a totally and permanently disabled veteran and your service connected 100%, totally permanently, you have no property taxes. Combat disabled, you get a percentage reduction in your taxes that correlates to whatever your disability is. If you are a widow, you're entitled to a small exemption. If you're visually impaired, you're entitled to a small exemption. And you can stack all these exemptions to reduce your tax bill. And so please contact me by September 18th. We can still apply that. So all these exemptions will be reflected in your November tax bill. So you won't pay too much money. The last couple things I'll say, it's almost like your income taxes. You know, I don't want to give one more dime to the federal government that I'm supposed to give. And so it's the same thing. If you are entitled to a property tax exemption you're not getting, you've earned it under the Constitution. You should get that. If you don't get that, you're going to be paying more money in November than you should be paying. That's money that should be in your pocket. And just to answer the last part of that question, this year we've actually, because there are so many people that moved in here last year, we've had a significant amount of people that have signed up for homestead exemptions. Right now we have close to, I believe, 400,000 people that have a homestead exemption in Broward County. We sign thousands up every single year. Low-income senior exemptions, we've had thousands of seniors we signed up this year as well. And one reason we're able to do that is because good folks like yourself, people in the real estate community, really help us get the word out and let people know that these are available to them. So please call me by September 18th. I really want to apply it. I hope that answered your question. I've had like 5 cups of coffee, 2 Red Bulls, and a Diet Coke, so I'm kind of wired. I apologize about that.
Well, thank you. And I know you have to leave us at 1 o'clock because you've got something else. I've got a couple more questions here, and hopefully we can get Paul and Sabrina to give us their comments on it. We'll wrap this up real quick, but thank you, Marty. Do appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, do you want to take a question about what non-homesteaded investment entrepreneur getting crushed on NOI? However, the 10% cap doesn't preclude he or she will receive relief. What kind of, how will this be addressed with losses and rent growth? What do you see?
The NOI is an important aspect of the income approach in doing the value. So, you know, sales, income, and cost. And in income producing property, that it all is tied to that NOI. So the smaller your net operating income, the less value of your property. Cap rates play into that. You know, cap rates are in the 5, 6, 7% range, depending on the type of property it is and type of client. Yeah, you know, as your NOI drops, so the value of your property is going to drop. So we've got to play that against the sales side and the cost side, and weight all 3 approaches in coming to an ultimate value.
Great, thank you. Sabrina, give you the last couple of words here. What can we do to send you some business? What kind of people are you looking to meet with, and what can we do to help you out since you've been so gracious in helping us out?
There's really not a property type that we don't look at. Generally speaking, it's high value commercial properties or high value residential properties, generally that are either on the roll for the first time or they've had a loss of exemption that the taxpayer believes is an incorrect loss of an exemption. The other thing we help our commercial property owners with is budget projections, whether it's on a new property or budgeting projections for tax purposes for a significant new client. They may be bringing on a significant new tenant. The other legal aspect we handle is what we call not complete cases. For those properties that either have undergone a calamity or being rehabbed or just new construction, the improvement itself should not be on the roll if it was not complete and not habitable as of January 1st. And we can help with those as well, but it also involves filing a petition in a timely manner. Really, we're happy to evaluate anybody's properties. We're creative in our approach and give you it's not always what you want to hear as a recommendation, but we'll give you a real life recommendation as to where and how we think we can get a reduction in value.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, Marty. Several people have asked. I believe we recorded this session. So the links will be up on the Florida CCIM website. So follow us with the state chapter with social media. Those will be posted in a couple of days. I know we're going to put it on the Miami-Dade YouTube channel. And if anybody would like the presentations, I'm sure Sabrina and Paul, you have no problem sharing those as well. So we will post those as well on the Florida chapter website. So keep an eye out for that. This is Tuesday. We'll probably have it up Thursday or Friday. And Bellies, thank you again for sponsoring with BGI Capital. Really appreciate you and your work as our secretary for Miami-Dade, and thank you for helping to participate. I'm going to wrap it up and turn it over to Terry to close this out. So thank you all.
Yeah, Michael, I want to thank you for putting this presentation together. I particularly want to thank our presenters and for the great job and the wealth of information that you provided today. I want to thank BGI Capital and Malbelli's for being our sponsor. We really appreciate you. We really appreciate all our sponsors. And I just wanted to say for most of us, and we did have a little president's panel for one of these lunch and learns, and our district presidents. So we have 8 districts representing the state of Florida in our Florida chapter. Real estate is booming for commercial realtors, and I don't know how long it'll last. It may very well be a bubble. We know that the economy is going to come to task, and for some of the properties, particularly retail and some of the office properties, we're going to see some values and some opportunities come to task. We fully expect there'll be a correction in the equities market, and I think it'll be followed closely by corrections in the real estate markets. So be prepared for that. But for the time being, things seem to be rolling along pretty strongly. Take advantage of this great market that we're having. I had one final question for Sabrina, if you didn't mind. And my question, Sabrina, is that I understand from your presentation that you saved your clients about $5 million in tax savings through your actions. What is your fee to represent a client?
Generally speaking, we represent a fee on a taxpayer on a contingency basis, and we charge a percentage of tax savings. And that percentage is dependent upon the type of work we're doing for them and the type of portfolio we're representing them on their behalf.
If you had to bracket that, what would the bracket be?
So the range would be, generally speaking, somewhere between 25% for a taxpayer client that has a significant portfolio, upwards to 35 to 40% for a single family home.
And to me, even if it were 50%, you're saving people money. So
particularly with a home, with a residential home, if it's your homestead, if you get your base year down low, you're saving them year after year because the cap follows it, which is a beautiful thing.
You've earned your money, and that's for sure. So we hope people take advantage of you and your firm and look that way when they need a reduction in their taxes. Thanks so much, all the presenters. Thanks to the over 120 participants that we had and to the people that will watch us in the future. And with that, we'll close this program out. Thank you so much.